Hey everyone, we are just about to get started with our main call here in a minute. My name is Erin. I'm with Bay Area News Group. Wanted to just go over a few housekeeping notes with everyone. Everyone is going to be on mute, so if you do have a question, please go ahead and use that Q&A button on your Zoom toolbar. Any other comments, please go ahead and use that chat feature. We would love to hear from you. And like I said, we're going to get started here in a minute. We also wanted to kind of promote our third episode of our sports series. It's going to be our final one. It is the episode 3 about the NFL. It'll be next week, August 6th at 10 a.m. So please go ahead and register for that. You do have to register separately. So please make sure you do that. And I think we're ready to get started. I'm so happy to introduce to you Tom Moore. He's our executive sports editor, actually from Southern California News Group. We are doing this, California-wide. So we have some of our journalists from the Bay Area News Group, some journalists from Southern California News Group. So we kind of get a holistic look at California basketball. And Tom, please go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, I'm excited about this conversation. Thanks to all the writers that have joined. My name's Tom Moore. I'm the sports editor at the Southern California News Group. So that includes the Orange County Register, the LA Daily News, the Riverside Press Enterprise, among others. And I'm a huge basketball fan, and I've never seen anything quite like the run-up to this season, with the pursuit of Kawhi Leonard, all that went into the free agency, the Lakers and Clippers both expecting to contend. And then, we had Kobe Bryant's death and a pandemic and, all the work that's taken place to reach this moment where we're going to return to basketball and a Lakers-Clippers matchup tonight. So there's a ton to talk about. I think we're going to run out of time pretty quick. But I want to introduce the writers here. We've got Kyle Goon inside the NBA bubble, been doing great work from there. He covers the Lakers. We've got Miriam Swanson, who covers the Clippers and pitches in on Lakers coverage for us all the time. And she also covers the WNBA and the Sparks for us. And we've got Wes Goldberg. He's the Warriors beat writer for the Mercury News. And we've got Dieter Kurtenbach. If I said that right, I think I did. Columnist for the Bay Area News Group. But I want to just go around the room a little bit and do some introductions. So Kyle, we'll start with you.
Yeah, what's there to say? I'm in Florida. I've been covering the Lakers the last 2 years, which have to count for the craziest last 2 years of the Lakers franchise, perhaps.
I think that's like 5 years in real time now.
Yeah, it's like dog years or something. This time a year ago, I thought Magic resigning on the last day of the season in front of the media would be the craziest thing I ever saw. So, here we are. Yeah, but I am in Orlando. I'm going to be watching Lakers Clippers tonight live.
Miriam, let's go to you. Thanks, Kyle.
Sure. Hey all, Miriam. I hope it doesn't get any crazier, Kyle. I don't think we can take it.
I think we've reached peak crazy, but it could. Every time you think that, it changes in 2020.
No doubt. Yeah. So I've been with SENG for a little less than Kyle, but this is my second year covering the NBA. Graduated from college, and the dream was to cover the NBA and the WNBA, and somehow, after a roundabout trip through covering everything from Oscar winners and city council meetings to golf and action sports, I finally get to do it. So that's me.
Thanks, Miriam. Wes, let's give you a minute to introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, where Kyle is, he's been in Florida for a couple of weeks. I was in Florida for 22 years, born and raised in South Florida. So I know, maybe I don't know exactly what you're going through, but I have a general sense. And I moved out here about 6 years ago after I graduated from UCF. And this is my first year on the Warriors beat for the Mercury News. And I'm not really sure if it counts as a completed season for me, but it was crazy nonetheless. And so, yeah.
Everything that's happened to the Warriors is Wes's fault, is what he's trying to say.
That's what I've been saying the entire year.
One element that
people tell me
different.
that all the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it wasn't that new stadium or anything or all those injuries. It was Wes Goldberg. The entire team took a poll and said, let's tank for Wes.
Blame me, not Aaron Baines.
Dieter, since you have the floor, how about
Sorry.
introducing yourself?
Hi, Dieter Kurtenbach. I'm the sports columnist at the Bay Area News Group, which means that I cover everything. But over the last couple of years, that means that I more or less just cover the Warriors because they had one hell of a run. And luckily, Wes has filled me in on how bad things were this year because I did not go to Chase Center as often as I went to Oracle Arena in the last couple of years. This is, my fifth year with the Warriors, maybe 4.5 if we're using the Wes Goldberg logic. And yeah, we've just seen some crazy things, 5 straight finals runs, and now whatever the hell this is. And while Kyle's spending time in Florida and Wes spent 22 years, I only did 3.5 in South Florida. So I guess I'm beaten on all counts there.
Thanks, Dieter. So let's start talking about tonight's game a little bit. First of all, I want to apologize. There's a door right here behind me, and my 9-year-old daughter, she's asleep right now, but I think she's going to wake up, and her hair is going to be a big mess, and she may walk right through this door to get her Legos. So if that happens, do not be surprised. Kyle, tell us what you're thinking about tonight and what we might expect. There have been 3 versions of Lakers Clippers, all pretty memorable, from opening day to Christmas Day to the Lakers victory when both teams were fairly close to full strength. What are you expecting tonight out of this matchup?
I can tell you one thing with certainty that will not happen is that Kawhi Leonard will not get booed in his own arena for his own home game. So in that sense, the Clippers are already coming out to a strong start. I really wonder what this game will mean because every Lakers-Clippers game has been like a measuring stick, right? It's been, okay, like here are these stars, here are these, veteran teams. What's like, where do they stack up? We really think these two teams are going to be in the Western Conference Finals. I still feel that way now. I don't know if this game is going to be the measuring stick that some of the other ones have been at Christmas when the Clippers prevailed back in March when the Lakers finally won one. I think it will be a little bit like the first one where there's going to be a little bit of growing pains. We see the rust that guys have. And frankly, I mean, we can't talk about this game without acknowledging how many guys the Clippers are probably going to be without. I mean, including Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, and I suspect, even though he's questionable, Patrick Beverley, who was at shoot-around today, but not literally shooting around today. So it's just not the same team. And the Clippers without Avery Bradley and Rajon Rondo are not quite the same either. And introducing Deion Waiters and J.R. Smith, which, I mean, listen, we thought we had the meme team last year. This is a brand new reconnecting of the meme team. But I wonder, I think it will just be that initial sort of coming out of the starting blocks, who's going a little bit faster.
Miriam, what are you looking for tonight, especially Clippers related, as you watch?
Well, I think in its own way, as Kyle sort of mentioned, this is very much a measuring stick. Just the measuring stick now is, where are we at the start or the restart of everything. But yeah, the Clippers will not be the Clippers that they were when this ended. They don't have they won't have their superstar duo or their star reserves, Trez and Lou Williams and Pat Bev, as Kyle saw in person today in the bubble, was there but not yet participating. So that will obviously change the dynamic of the game. But I think I'm looking for how Paul George has looked really good in the 3 scrimmages so far, but Kawhi hasn't looked so good. He shot horribly so far. So we'll see if he can kind of wake up and turn it on a little bit, or how he kind of, goes into, finds a rhythm going forward. Also, the Clippers were without Landry Shamet and Ivica Zubac for most, if not all, of the scrimmages. So they're working those guys in brand new too. So there's a lot of room for, there's a lot of work to do yet for the Clippers. So we'll see how they stack up.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I'm just trying to, in my head, try to figure out how this game is different from some of the scrimmages that have been happening as everybody gets back, right? Because it is a measuring stick, it is a rivalry, but it's going to be the same kind of a floor and no fans atmosphere and missing pieces, and it should be interesting. Wes, I assume you're going to watch tonight and tune in, and as a without having a team and having to work tonight during that game, I guess. What are your thoughts going into that?
Well, I'm just thankful to watch some high quality basketball for the first time in months. And that's a little bit of a knock on the Warriors, but it's also good to just have sports back too. No, I'm looking for kind of what we were talking about. Which one of these two groups can sort of establish an edge, and how many of their cards do they want to show to the other team? Like the Clippers, with all the injuries that they have, they're not going to be able to show all their cards. But what can the Lakers do? They're going to be missing Rondo, of course, and he's going to be a part of that rotation, I suppose, going forward. But there's also the working in of the J.R. Smiths and Deion Waiters and stuff like that. But how much do they really want to show? Because what these coaches, Frank Vogel, Doc Rivers, had so much time to do is go back on the film, watch those old games, and try to figure out whatever edges they have. I would doubt that they would show those edges at any point. We're already seeing some teams in the bubble opt not to take timeouts at the end of these scrimmages because they don't want to tip their hand to some of their out of timeout plays and stuff. And so I think we'll see a little bit of, there'll be a moment, right? There'll be a few minutes during this game where they really go at each other, where the players just say, screw it, let's do this. But it's not, I think we're going to see less of that, maybe from the coaches, who could be a little bit more restrained.
Yeah, there's just so much learning both teams are going to be trying to do. And I agree with you that they're not going to tip anything that's going to matter later. Dieter, what are you writing off? What are you writing today? And are you just going to be done writing and just tuning in to watch this one?
Yeah, if you guys are interested on the Oakland A's now, it's the thing, very specifically, the thing that I'm interested to see is if LeBron and Alex Caruso can get kind of some chemistry that I saw develop this season back on track. With Rondo out, I think that's imperative for the Lakers. The big question for me regarding the Lakers is how are they going to handle Anthony Davis in crunch time moments, and how often will he actually play center? They're still kind of the only team holding out this notion that Anthony Davis is a power forward, and I cannot imagine that that's the case, or that they hold on to that belief deep into the playoffs. But as everyone's alluded to, I don't think that the Lakers are going to show their hand too much. So I'm interested to see the Alex Caruso LeBron connection. LeBron has always seemed to have a pretty good connection with scrappy white point guards who can move off the ball. So I saw it year after year with Cleveland and Matthew Dellavedova. I think that Alex Caruso is a much better player than Matthew Dellavedova. So that's something to definitely keep an eye on, because chemistry is one of those things that you don't really hold back in games that probably don't really matter all that much.
Yeah, thanks, Dieter. We'll come back to tonight, but I wanted to take a moment to just talk a little bit about the team that is not playing, the Warriors, and just kind of Wes, get your take, and then Dieter's on one, an update on where Clay's at, and what you've seen in his rehab. And what are the key things you're looking at for the off season for the Warriors?
Well, as far as Clay goes, everything, he's working out in Southern California right now, and everything seems to be good. He's been shooting around a lot. He's really happy with where he's at in his rehab. So he's probably going to hit the ground running next year. I think if there are any issues with Clay, it's just how he can move defensively, which you never really know until you're doing that in a game. But as far as the shot, he's going to be able to shoot. So, the splashes will still happen. Steph, same thing. There seems to be no indication that the left hand is going to be a problem going forward. And then having those two guys back next year for the Warriors, that offense is going to be way better than it was this year. I think that goes without saying. They'll probably be a top 15 offense right out the gate. It's the defense where I have some concerns with the Warriors. And I think it's where their concerns are. They need to take a huge step forward. And so I think that's the plan for this offseason is what can they do with the top 5 pick, with this trade exception that they have, where they'll be able to acquire a player who makes up to $17 million. They have a couple of other avenues to go about adding players. Those players they add, I think the number one box they need to check off is, can you make this defense better than it was last year? Because if they can't, then, and they need to take like a dramatic leap from like worst in the league to at least above average, like 15 or above. That's going to take a lot of new players and a lot of development from that team. And so that's, to me, what I'm looking for. But it all starts in a couple of weeks with the draft lottery in August. They have a good chance to get the number 1 pick, but moreover, they're guaranteed to get a top 5 pick. I think it's almost a 50% chance that they end up at 5. And so wherever that pick falls is going to really shape what they're able to do this offseason, because it's not the best NBA draft that we've had in a few years. So, the number 1 pick versus the 5th pick could be dramatically, you can get a dramatically different player between 1 and 5.
Peter, what are you keeping an eye on?
Going off of what Wes was saying in terms of defense, a big part of that is going to be Draymond Green just trying harder. No real nice way to put that. He was surrounded by a bunch of guys who, let's be real, weren't 16-game players, as he likes to call them. They were 82-game guys, or maybe about 60 of those games were down in the NBA Development G League. So he did not engage in the way that you expect Draymond Green to engage. I imagine Steph and Klay coming back will have him elevate his game. We'll see how much he has in the tank. That's a big question. He put on a lot of hard miles over those championship runs. And then going again off of what Wes was saying, they're going to need to add a wing. They're going to need to add a guy who can slide in when Draymond goes to the center position in crunch time minutes of games that they're expecting to win, which the expectation is next year they're going to try to win some games. It's a big goal, but they're going to go for it. Who can be a defensive first wing? Who can be a lockdown guy? Klay Thompson is going to try to go back to guarding the other team's point guards in lieu of Steph. Andrew Wiggins, who they brought in this past year, he's not that guy. He's done better than I think the Warriors expected in terms of defensive ability, but he's no Andre Iguodala. Basically, they need to recreate Andre Iguodala, and they have Andre Iguodala's $17 million salary exemption in which to do it, and a draft pick. I wouldn't be shocked if they traded that draft pick, that top 5 pick, in conjunction or as a separate deal to land a couple of NBA players, because their championship window is right now, and getting some 19-year-old kid who, out of a really bad draft, if we're being honest, I don't know if that does anything to help them while Steph and Klay are still in their primes.
Do you guys, either Wes or Dieter, you have a couple names you think they might target that fit that role you're talking about? If this is
Wes's foray. Wes has got all the names.
No, I pushed back a little bit on the even trading that pick, because I think the pick that is more apt to get traded is next year's pick coming from Minnesota. It's top 3 protected. We don't know what Minnesota is going to look like. You already have done the work for this draft, and you're guaranteed to have it in the top 5, where next year there's no way it can land in the top 3 if you're the Warriors, because then it goes to Minnesota, and it could be the 12th pick, the 13th pick, instead of a guaranteed top 5 pick. You could trade that pick with the trade exception and go get a player. I think this organization has done a lot of work on this draft. They've been preparing for a top 5 pick since basically December. And so they sort of owe it to themselves to go ahead and just take a player and trust your scouting and trust your coaching staff to develop that player. And I look at guys who are wings, to what Dieter was saying, guys who can walk in right away, make some shots, guard several different positions. I don't think center is really an option for them in the top 5. I don't think James Wiseman is a fit there. But if you look at a guy like Anthony Edwards, who's also at the top of a lot of boards, he makes a lot of sense for Golden State. A guy who's a ridiculous athlete, which the Warriors quietly need. Like, their best athlete is Andrew Wiggins. Their second best athlete is, Marquise Chris.
Yeah.
Like, they need to add athleticism. Anthony Edwards is that athlete. Can guard several positions, can cut off the ball, like I said. His catch and shoot numbers have been pretty good at Georgia. He's going from maybe the worst possible situation in Georgia, which was not leveraging his talents, to a great situation, hypothetically, in Golden State. So he's just going to be like Anthony Edwards' last day at Georgia versus his first day at Golden State. He's going to be a much better player in Golden State. And then the other guys that I like, Tyrese Halliburton, Devin Vassell, Sadiq Bey. I mean, just all these wings who can guard several positions, make shots right away. One thing that I've been thinking about this draft is a lot of people at the beginning of the year when Steph went down were saying, oh, this could be the Warriors. This could be their Tim Duncan draft where David Robinson goes down. They take Tim Duncan. I look at it more as like this could be their Kawhi Leonard draft, where if we want to make the Spurs analogies over and over again, where their championship infrastructure is already there. You have a core trio of veteran players who know what to do and have playoff and championship experience, but they're on the other side of 30. You need to add some youth and athleticism. That's what Kawhi did for the Spurs. He walked in, he was a 3-and-D player right away, and then developed into a future franchise building block. That's what the Warriors need with this pick. Get a guy who can get 20 minutes a night, not be a complete negative, make some shots, guard some people, and then, you know, years down the line when Steph is really out, then you can maybe develop that person into a all-star type player.
Well, Wes, Kawhi Leonard was selected with the 15th overall pick in the 2011 draft, and I believe what you referred to in terms of they've put in a lot of work in this draft and they owe it to themselves is the sunk cost fallacy. So
you're not wrong.
Yeah, maybe they should not operate on that wavelength, though. You're probably going to be correct, as you usually are.
Well, thanks, guys. I think we should return to the teams that are currently playing. But maybe before that, though, I'd like to go around and ask each of you what your 2020 moment has been in such a strange year, in how, you know, your work has crossed paths with, you know, all we're going through in this year, and maybe just the most unusual, or, you know, the thing that, you know, got your attention and most memorable in terms of the moment we're living in right now. I'm going to save Kyle for last on this, since he's down there in this unusual place. But Miriam, what about you?
I mean, there's so many, and so many of it is, you know, we've collectively experienced it together, you know, as far as working from home and doing nothing but Zoom interviews and all, well, not all of us, Kyle's there in real life, but the rest of us. But I guess the moment early on when that really kind of brought COVID to light was when one of the Sparks players was the first WNBA player who came down with coronavirus, and Sydney Weiss had a heck of a time she was playing in Spain, where there was a huge outbreak happening before ours, and then she had to hustle to get home while she could, afraid that they wouldn't let her back in anymore. And then she went through a whole number of airports where there was no screening, and she was stuck with a bunch of people, and she sort of had some symptoms, and just her adventure was quite telling of what was coming. And then she tried like heck to get tested, and finally got tested positive, and she recovered and she's okay. But it just sort of made me realize that this is coming from everywhere, and how we didn't have a handle on it at all. So it was interesting to sort of tell her story a little bit at the beginning. I
remember that at that time too, that you know, the Jazz had their outbreak sort of at the same time, and the NBA players were able to get tested immediately, and Sydney was asking to be tested, and there was, you know, tests weren't available. She wasn't able to get tested.
Yeah, I mean, there were. I guess the Jazz were tested as, you know, for the potential of being a super spreader, you know, right. A super spreader event, and so they went about it that way. But no, I guess obviously NBA teams had an easier time being tested than the normal people, and obviously WNBA players are considered more along the lines of civilians to maybe NBA players, especially, you know, a reserve guard on the LA Sparks, perhaps. But it just you know, was a sign of how difficult this problem was going to be.
Yeah. We'll come back to the WNBA too. But Wes, what's been your 2020 moment that stands out, just that brought it home to you how real the pandemic is, and how strange the sports world is going to become here?
I think it's probably the day before everything went down at Chase Center. California was one of the first states, obviously, to issue shelter in place, and and the Warriors were getting quite a bit of pressure from, you know, the San Francisco government to basically shut down Chase Center, and there was some push and pull there. But I remember the day before we were talking about playing games without fans and how weird that was going to be. That was March 11th.
Right.
And we had a whole press conference with Bob Myers and Steve Kerr and how weird that would be. And then a day later, I remember I'm working late at Chase Center because they had a practice or whatever. And we were kind of talking about that again, working late on this story. And I'm leaving. And in the hallway, I see this thing about how Rudy Gobert tested positive. And I'm just like, I remember talking to the person sitting, walking with me out of the Chase Center. I'm like, this is it. I think the season's going to be over. Like, I think they're going to cancel it. And then within like a few minutes, they had canceled it. And I just remember that exact moment, just being like, how surreal that was, from working like for the last 48 hours on just how weird it would be to not play in front of fans, to now the whole thing just being gone and canceled.
Right. There was just that escalation of one moment after another at that
Right.
time. Dieter, what stands out to you among maybe many things?
So after Warriors games, Wes and I would often and still plan on doing like video stand-ups whenever basketball comes back, whenever we're allowed back in an arena. And I just remember, I mean, this is the thing that stands out most to me and kind of the most memorable moment. We all went through sort of the development of this together and the craziness of it together. And it was very strange. The Warriors were on a homestand the entire time. And so you're going in and out of this arena. You're wondering if that's a good idea. Everybody's a hypochondriac. And it's like, it was absolutely insane. But we're doing this stand up and there's just people in hazmat suits fumigating the entire arena. Just spraying it down, you know, for contagion. Right. And I'm like, I got to get the hell out of here. And sure enough, they did not invite us back after that. But, you know, then of course, the Rudy Gobert situation, my fiance, I remember, said, we have to go out for dinner tonight because this is the last night that you're off and this might be it. And while we're at dinner, there's a TV in the corner and I'm kind of keeping my eye on the game, and the entire world ended. Tom Hanks got it. The president put in a travel ban, and Rudy Gobert got it, and they shut down the NBA all within an hour. So I'm really glad that we had dinner that night because she was totally right.
And have you been out to dinner since?
We are allowed to eat outdoors, and we did actually come down to LA for a minute to help my grandfather out for a smidge, masks on, of course. And there was indoor dining, and it was such a surreal experience, even having to wear the mask, that it's gonna last with us for a very long time.
Kyle, you and I talk pretty much daily about what life is like in the bubble and how strange that is. But what, you know, before you get into your long version of how strange it is down there, what are a couple things that maybe stand out to you about 2020 so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is actually helpful for me to stick on the bubble because a lot of people, you know, don't have access to here and don't know what it's like. I mean, I think the biggest thing that people don't really think about is the bubble is communal, and one person's health here is critical to everyone else's health here. So sort of incidents like what happened with Lou Williams being caught getting pickup at a local Atlanta establishment. You know, I mean, it's weird, and I wrote about this because it's not only a news event, but I mean, I was interviewing Lou Williams shortly before he left for this family emergency, which you know, was a legitimate funeral for a member of his family. Right. He happened to make a mistake after that. Not an unintentional mistake, as Doc Rivers keeps seeming to say. They should stop using that language because it can't be unintentional at this point. But I really think that it's just strange as a media member when we take so much, you know, time and effort to distance ourselves from some of these events that are happening. And so much of 2020 has been, gosh, this is deeply personal because everyone's affected by the pandemic. In the bubble, you know, our safety, I mean, I was interviewing Lou Williams on Wednesday and I was standing, you know, about 6 feet away from him, but we were in a small room. You know, you think about stuff like that and it does feel personal, and you can't really, the best I can do is acknowledge it because I can't really remove myself from it. And that's true of many stories this year, including Kobe Bryant, which, I mean, it was like everyone in my world, lost a friend, right?
Right.
That's just impossible. It's emotionally exhausting. It's been just the strangest year for so many reasons. LeBron said, nothing is normal in 2020. You just have to adapt, and I think that's what we're all doing. And in some ways, as a media member, this year is more personal than any year I've had in my career for just these reasons of you can't divorce yourself from it.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think we've all felt that here in LA with Kobe but it, everybody trying to get through these times. I think we'll certainly welcome basketball tonight. Kyle, maybe you can share a couple other, just insider. I mean, you talked about like seeing the referees playing games by the pool, right? Little quirky things that you're seeing in the bubble.
Yeah, so I think one thing people don't realize is, there's a television product. What you see on TV, you've seen the players, you've seen the coaches, the video screens, but there's so much that goes into that. The biggest thing I heard when the bubble was being created and the protocols were being created was from teams being like, if we only travel 35 people, how are we going to put on games? So there's also the equipment staff. There's also health staff. There's, an on-site medical team at Disney. There's team attendance, just this army of like college age ball boys and ball women who are just staying here for the summer as temporary employees, and kind of still trying to get a hold of where they all came from. They're like summer interns for the bubble. And like I was telling you the other day, Tom, referees are here, and 1 minute they're being screamed at by players on this court, and then another minute I watch them playing pickleball every morning, very competitively to stay in shape. So it's just what is reinforced by living here is just the infrastructure required to put on NBA games. It's a lot more than people might think. Technical people, and camera people and people who are setting up these giant screens and testing them, scorekeepers. It's a wild production to kind of see this micro environment constructed just to put on basketball.
It's very it's such a manufactured place and temporary and yet very real for everybody who's living in it for several months. So I know from my point of view, I really appreciate you being able to just upend your life and take that trip down there and embed yourself. It's been enjoyable for me to just hear the stories you're telling. I wanted to take maybe just a minute to talk about the WNBA too. From the hoodies that NBA players were wearing to social justice questions, it feels like to me that the WNBA has been a leader in sort of setting an agenda. Miriam, you talk to Sparks players and on a pretty regular basis via Zoom, and can you talk about what the WNBA means to the moment we're in here?
To hear them tell it, this is, just like a moment that's recognizing what they've been doing for several years now.
Yeah.
In 2016, Tiara Ruffin-Pratt, when she was with the Mystics, was, they all wore shirts that said Black Lives Matter, and they were fined for it. So that's
not very long ago.
No, yeah. So now obviously it's on the court, and they're wearing Breonna Taylor on the backs of their jerseys. They're not on the court for the national anthem. But like Candace Parker is often says that they're a minority league, and that they're 80% Black, and obviously they're women, and there's a lot of LGBTQ representation with there. So just by their existence alone, they're pretty political. So yeah, the attention that they're getting is in the light that's sort of being shined on their efforts is just kind of recognition of what they've been about for quite a long time.
Kyle, do you see, I think we think back to Kobe and the connection he and his daughter had with the WNBA, but also, in the NBA in general. I think you see more and more recognition of the women's game and how important these athletes are. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, and the other day at the scrimmage, LeBron wore one of those orange WNBA hoodies to the game. Deion Waiters was wearing it after the game, saying we got to hold it down for the women, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
I do think there's a broader recognition. I mean, some of the things that the NBA and the NBPA have done here, including a Sunday conversation with Michelle Obama, has also included the WNBA. So I think there's always been sort of a bond, but I think there is a bit of a stronger bond, especially over these social issues that both the NBA players and WNBA players are trying to put out there, especially when it comes to voting, especially when it comes to Breonna Taylor. WNBA, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe had incredible ratings this weekend. And I think that was in part, maybe they got a little nudge from NBA players who were saying, hey, watch this game, watch these players. And Brittany Sykes' own athleticism on display for the Sparks this weekend.
That's
so
right.
I think there is some common goals there between these leagues, and that have only been strengthened in the last couple months.
I wanted, and maybe we'll start with Wes and Dieter on this question, but and then come back around to Kyle and Miriam. Kyle, you talked a little bit about Kobe Bryant's death. Wes, how did that moment strike you? And how did the Bay Area experience? We were so embedded in it here in LA. What was that like where you were and to cover the NBA as that happened in the Bay Area?
Yeah, I remember it's one of those moments where you remember exactly where you were when you heard it. And I was at Chase Center because that's where I spent, 98% of my time.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the other reporters was like, did you hear about Kobe? I had just walked into the press room and I was like, what about Kobe? And obviously they told me, and I was just like, that's not true. There's no way. And then obviously it hits you and you realize it. And the Warriors canceled their availability. They just completely canceled their shoot around or their practice that day. So I just remember sitting there and just trying to figure out what to do and what to write. And eventually we had a phone conference with Bob Myers, but that was sort of the coverage of it. And then you just had these and obviously you guys know in Southern California more than anybody, but then you just had the reports coming out after and just like this unending wave of just more information and more reaction and things like that. And the next game that the Warriors played, I believe it was either the next game or the next road game, was in Philadelphia. And so we had that trip, and I broke away the day before the game and went to Lower Merion High School, where Kobe Bryant went to high school just outside of Philly. And that to me was the moment where it really kind of hit, where I'm walking to that high school and they have this huge memorial out there with just Kobe Bryant sneakers and posters and just letters to Kobe and the family, just people mourning, crying, just like outside that memorial. And it was again like one of those moments where you, like Kyle was saying, it's hard to divorce yourself from just all the emotion and your own personal feelings about it and the whole thing. And it was emotional for me to see
Mm-hmm.
people just sort of break down in
Right.
front. And so I got some interviews and I did what I needed to do. And then I just hung out for like another hour and a half and just sort of took it all in. And then I actually remember calling an Uber and getting in that Uber, and my Uber driver ended up making my story because he went to school with Kobe, or he didn't go to school with Kobe, but played for the rival high school.
Wow.
And so I ended up getting that interview. He ended up, I think, making the story. But it was just a while. Like I had my recorder on for, I don't know, 15 minutes. And then we just we just chatted for the next like 30 minutes because that's how far my hotel was. But it was surreal. Yeah.
Dieter, how did you experience that moment?
I was going to the Super Bowl that week.
Huh.
I found out at my hometown airport, Midway Airport, south side of Chicago. Just sitting there, we were just having a beer in between flights, and it was like, I guess I shouldn't announce that. That might be some expense report issues, but like
I'm making note of that. Yeah,
yes, yeah. Don't worry, I got plenty more. And I'm gonna get audited now, but yeah, you overhear it, and you're like, wait, what? You know, and your phone hasn't adapted to the fact that it went through 3 time zones and all that, and then finally, and just the steady stream. And we had a flight in another, 20 minutes. And so it happens. You then have to remove yourself from what is clearly a zeitgeist moment and this kind of collective understanding of something terrible that just happened that seemingly affected everybody. And then you go down to the Super Bowl of all places in Miami, and that was the story of the week. And at the same time, you have the coronavirus stuff starting to really heat up. I remember how strange it felt to be away from the Bay Area, away from California in that moment, because it seemed as if everybody wanted to just kind of get back home. And it really did set off a incredibly bizarre chain reaction of circumstance that is still with us today. But I very vividly, as Wes alluded to, remember the bar at the Midway Airport as me and my colleagues were just sitting there waiting for our next flight.
Yeah, we'll never forget, when we all heard about it. My story is that I was helping coach my daughter's basketball team, and phone's in my pocket, messages are turned off, and it's at halftime that a guy comes out of the stand holding his cell phone and pulls the ref over, and the ref announces it to the group there. And it had been a little bit of time. It had been a minute before I realized that we had the biggest sports story in LA history maybe happening. And I remember telling the head coach, hey, I got to go. And saying to my daughter, hey, I got a big story. I got to leave your game. Right. And then, the feeling of that connection between daughters and dads and coaches and the other girls that were lost. And then trying to get on the phone with Kyle, who after a long grind was going to take a couple days off and catch up with his family. Right. Hey, Kyle, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry.
There you go.
Yeah. I was going to take some time off, and obviously that changed, and I flew back the next day. But to kind of advance this, you almost feel like what happened with the pandemic, although it's not beneficial to anybody. I'm interested to see how that kind of balances out what the Lakers had already been dealing with Kobe's death, because even before he died, Kobe's shadow loomed so large over this era of Lakers basketball. They had not reached the playoffs before this year since he left, and LeBron is sort of the next star in line, right? I mean, this tenure is already this great weight for him. And then Kobe dies in this shocking and terrible way. And I think LeBron was at the fore of it. I think he very much in the locker room helped keep them together. But one thing that struck me at the time was we are going to be talking about Kobe all year, and it's going to be hard. I wrote a couple stories at the time, like basically every time you go to a visiting arena, there's going to be a Kobe tribute video, and it's going to be a lot of re-exposure to that kind of trauma, and hard for these guys, a lot of them who knew Kobe personally, or like in the case of somebody like Quinn Cook, former Warrior, idolized Kobe. This was the player that was on his wall even before he was in the NBA, and then once he was in the NBA, he could call him. And I think now that there's been a break, in that now that, you know, it's the season isn't just about playing for Kobe, which it is. I mean, LeBron has a finger sleeve with number 24 on it,
Right.
and he remembers that very closely. But the balance of it is, it's not just for Kobe. It's for all of basketball. It's for America in a sense, that the NBA is back. And I think that balance is easier emotionally for this team, and a little bit, not that, you know, it's the most important thing about Kobe's death, but it was heavy, right?
Yeah.
And,
Well,
I think it's going to be better for them in the long run.
That's not the single focus.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's not the single focus.
I think, I think I remember at one point when LeBron picked up the microphone and said, "I'm going to carry it for you. I'll carry the whole thing." I still think that's a part of this Lakers story. However it turns out, that he took on that responsibility or burden, or and it'll be interesting, as the playoffs go on, to see, where that fits. Miriam, I know you did the A1 story from the memorial for us, but what stands out to you in looking back at that time in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Kyle said. Like the pause and the things of the pandemic has given people kind of a time to mourn, and that's probably been good. But as far as LA, I mean, it just rocked LA to its core. I've never experienced anything like that, and can't imagine experiencing anything like that. I mean, just it's heavy just talking about it. I'm the same age as Kobe was, and
Right.
and I grew up in Southern California, and even when I was in Oregon, I was rocking Kobe jerseys at University of Oregon, and like he was my favorite basketball player. So it was hard. And then when you went out to the memorial, which you can't even describe unless you were there, it was just all of LA, just every cross section, everybody from young, old, everything from out, in the desert to right there in LA, leaving every piece of memorabilia you could leave, just, tons and tons of it. And it was just quiet, and people, everybody was just there, and they just mourning together. And I mean, I gave hugs to so many strangers and had so many conversations, and people were crying, and I cried a little bit, and it was crazy. Yeah, it was nothing I'll ever forget.
Yeah, well, hugs to strangers is a thing that's a thing of the past too.
Yeah.
One thing that strikes me, and it struck me at the time too, was we're such a divided country, so polarized, that I don't think there was anything quite like Kobe Bryant's death that made us feel like we're all in LA in this together. That was, and it'll be interesting to see what you guys think if just getting back to basketball has some of that element too, especially if we're looking at a Lakers or Clippers championship run here. If there's some feel of, we're all in this together. I mean, it's fairly stunning to me that a pandemic can't do that for us. But do you feel like, Kyle, that could be an element of what we're going to see in NBA basketball, or how do you feel about that question?
Yeah, I think it already is. I mean, I think here at the bubble, it's been very collegial. It's been very, among the players, they see each other on campus and wave and hang out and do stuff together. And, that may sort of change a little bit as we get into more intense games and series and things like that. But I mean, again, the NBA is an ecosystem. The NBA is composed of thousands. And there's just people here who are happy to work again and happy to, I mean, and I'm not talking about even just people associated game, but bus drivers here and security guards and PA announcers and all kinds of, I mean, like I described, the team attendants who are these college age kids who are, out of school and don't have opportunity to work. And that is such a powerful force to see in a country where obviously, we're not doing well, and obviously there's a lot of problems. And I think that will be something that's a little understated of this whole thing, that people are back at work because of the bubble. But it's definitely a unifying factor here, and something that a lot of people, when this game tips off tonight, are going to feel like that's a victory.
Yeah, I do think it is, a moment that we've kind of been waiting for. Dieter, what do you have thoughts on what the return of the NBA means to us as sports fans?
Well, obviously,
citizens.
It's great to have some level of normalcy back. I mean, how many days of our lives have we spent even outside of just our profession? But the reason that we're in this game is because we love it so much. And how many nights have we spent just, okay, it's out here, 4 or 5 o'clock, turn on the NBA and watch it until you go to bed.
Right.
That's just the normalcy of it. And being able to just have that back, being in a position now to casually watch sports as opposed to having to do appointment viewing because there's so little of it and you have to make it a priority in your day is it's great. And I'm been really impressed, at least, from 3,000 miles away, with the presentation, that it feels very authentic. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel eerie at all. We've seen with baseball coming back and playing in these empty stadiums, the cardboard cutouts help and the crowd noise helps a little bit, but I much prefer what they're doing in the NBA with, the tight proximity court and very minimalistic look on the court and kind of the scoreboards around it, what they've done with MLS at the same facility with, just put up some ads. I'll take some ads. I'll take some gross commercialization at this point of something that's not the coronavirus. So I've just been really impressed with how it's been handled, and we'll see. I mean, as this thing pushes forward, it's important to remember, this league has to get back to playing in arenas at some point. Financially, they cannot reasonably go back to the bubble next year. I know it's been suggested by the Players Association, but we got to get to a point where they're able to bring in some gate revenue because the TV contracts can only do so much. So I'm trying to kind of savor it because it does feel like it's just basketball. It's almost the most authentic form of basketball. We don't have to worry about the crowd influencing the refs or, the too loud, the nasty arena stuff going on. Like, it's just guys playing. It's a little bit AAU, but I think, everyone says, oh, we're going to get an asterisk on this championship. I would argue that this is the one true championship, if we're really calling it. Everybody's kind of dealing with the exact same environment. So really excited to kind of just savor these moments over the next few months because I hope, fingers crossed, they're once in a lifetime.
Yeah. Well, we've got a little time left for Q&A, and I want to remind anybody who's still with us out there that if you want to ask any questions, feel free to type those into the Q&A bar here. Got one of them. I'll just read it. Anonymous viewer says, I understand the NBA has invested a lot in technology for the fan experience tonight. Any comments from the panelists about what we should expect the fan experience is going to be like watching these games from the bubble? I'll start with Kyle.
Yeah, so it's been tweaking. So since in the 3 scrimmages that the Lakers have done, well, I've seen more scrimmages, but they've added in arena crowd noise, which is just kind of weird. It's like a 2K game. There's a little bit of delay. They've added home graphics with with the Lakers. It's like the Laker girls and various fans from different markets. I've heard that actually they've recorded calls of Lawrence Tanter, the in-arena announcer for the Lakers, and he's going to do introductions virtually in a way, and do a couple calls. So that will be there. But I mean, honestly, they're figuring out now. Like during the scrimmages, they were doing technical tests involving NBA employees in these digital seats. There's about 350 per game, and I think the idea for each team is to go through season ticket rolls and things like that to find these 350 people who can sit sort of like we are in front of their laptop and be virtually at the game. I think it'll be interesting to see how that develops. I mean, with the Lakers, you could have like, you could have like Jack Nicholson or
I was
Floyd
going to say
Mayweather.
Jack got to make an appearance, right?
Yeah. So you could do stuff like that. I mean, if you're creative enough, if the Lakers get there, we'll find out. But I think it is going to be interesting. I think it's also going to be maybe perhaps infuriating at times because everything is on the fly. I mean, I asked somebody yesterday from the NBA, is this piped in crowd noise in the arena going to stay? And they're like, well, I think so, but I don't know, because that's a lot of the answers to the questions. It's starting to look like that, but I don't actually know. No one really knows what the best way to do this is. And I think sort of to Dieter's point, what's going to carry this is the basketball. And if the players can bring energy and if benches can bring energy, I mean, that's so much more important. I mean, when the Clippers were playing the other night, they had more coaches on the bench than reserve players. And that actually really mattered in a game. I mean, they were so quiet in the game. And those things actually really matter in that environment. And I think people will kind of come to appreciate that as time goes on.
Miriam, I feel like the Clippers had something up their sleeves that they were going to announce today too.
Well, they've got a series of things they're working on. One of them is a interactive post-game show. I think they're doing it pre-game today, and then going forward it will be post-game on their Facebook page. They've launched a new Facebook page, and like the radio guy and Corey Maggette and a few others will be involved, and you can kind of ask them questions, and kind of like this, I think.
Yeah.
And then also like they have what Kyle, what you guys are going to see, something called Support the Squad, where they've invited season ticket holders to kind of record reactions to, like, if someone scores, if there's a get that out of here, OMG, like you're supposed to record these reactions you have, and I guess they're going to put them in a program and deliver them to the NBA, and the NBA will broadcast that in the arena somehow.
The appropriate time
well, hopefully
you can see that.
Time, yeah. So it remains to be seen how exactly that looks. And even I think the Clippers, they've got lots of ideas going, but they're also sort of in a wait and see mode too. So it's all going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think what is also interesting, the one way everybody will experience basketball is through TV. Nobody's going to these games anymore, and it'll be interesting to see. I think on social media and how people connect with each other to experience the return of the NBA together with other fans, and where that's happening and where the best experience is as they're watching too. I think we're getting fairly close to the end of our hour here. There's tons more we could talk about, but I'm going to give each writer a minute to wrap up with just some final thoughts before we get out and write about basketball. We'll start with Wes.
Well, I think kind of leading up to this NBA bubble here, there's a lot of questions about whether or not this would be good for everybody as as the country trying to figure out the coronavirus pandemic and the Black Lives Matters movement and everything that's going on. But I think what's been sort of staggering to me watching the bubble so far is how much it's normal because it's basketball, but it's very abnormal because of the way that the production is, because of the fact that the players are so outspoken about this cultural movement and stuff, that I think it has served as a reminder. And the competition has also been really good. Like in scrimmages, you've got like LeBron James and James Harden, Luka Doncic complaining about foul calls and stuff. So the urgency just seems to be there so much that I think it's going to end up being a positive experience. And maybe it's just a way where, you're able to bring people together, but you also have people potentially going out less or finding ways to get in trouble. Or ways to not socially distance, because maybe at the end of your night you can just sit down and watch NBA basketball for the first time and you have something to do for the first time in a long time. So I've been really impressed with the product so far.
Dieter, your final thoughts
I just got to
before we
say
tip
that
anything off, yeah.
when we have all of these, fans on I just don't like this episode of Black Mirror. I just think that it's way too much. They're doing an excellent job. I've been very critical of Adam Silver and his leadership over the years. I thought that it required the NBA players to essentially get this thing together, that he was dragging his feet, and that until the players got together on a Zoom call like this and basically realized, came to the conclusion, well, half of this is our money, so we're going to want to get that. Nothing really developed. But I gotta tip my hat. It helps that Rob Manfred, the commissioner of baseball, is doing such a bad job that it's lowered the bar
Relatively
significantly.
speaking, yeah.
But the NBA now, I couldn't tell you how many cycles of tests, but the bubble seems to be working stupendously, as well as expected. Yes, they're figuring out stuff on the fly. That's life in 2020. That's life in general, but we're really feeling it now. The leadership of the NBA has really handled this well, and I think that it bodes extremely well for this thing moving forward. So, Kyle, and you guys can provide far more perspective on how well the bubble's working or not. Maybe I'm just naive in this, but from the outside perspective, they've done a really good job in making this, as Wes alluded to, feel really authentic and straightforward, and at the same time, being extremely safe, which is very difficult to do in this day and age.
Right. Miriam, do you have some final thoughts for us before we see Clippers and Lakers in action tonight?
Yeah, I'm excited to see how it all plays out. Obviously, Doc Rivers said that there's no asterisk on this, that there should be a golden star, and Candace Parker over in the WNBA bubble, so there should be an exclamation point, not an asterisk. But I think they're right, because this has to be the hardest. I mean, the playoffs are so intense and so difficult anyway, normally, and then you do it here, cut off from the whole world, in this intense environment with all that's going on, and whoever comes out on top, I mean, what fortitude they have, and it really should be celebrated. And it's going to be really fascinating to see which group of people manages to pull that off.
Yeah, it's going to be quite an unfolding story here as we get going. Kyle, there was one thing I think in your newsletter, which, if anybody is not signed up for Kyle Goon's newsletter, click on the Orange County Register site and go to the newsletters and do yourself a favor and sign up, because he's got a lot of inside perspective on what's going on throughout there. There's only 10 reporters, 10 or is it maybe a dozen nationally, who are allowed to see and have the access Kyle does inside. So it's worth signing up. But I think one thing you sort of concluded today's newsletter with was, just comparing the people on the outside watching from the inside. And I think the way you put it was something about the people on the inside are all rooting for the people on the outside right now as well. And what are your final thoughts before we
one,
close this up?
So before that, I want to say something that I've tried to say on every media. I've tried to write this. The work of the bubble is not done until the bubble's over. And the NBA and NPPA had another announcement yesterday where they announced there were 0 positive coronavirus cases among players in the bubble, which is great. Like, that's how it's supposed to work. But it's just not over until it's over. And there's going to be people coming in and player guests coming in, and literally hundreds of people are going to turn over in the bubble, and every one of them has to follow the protocols, follow the rules, get tested, and all those things. So it's never over. This is the starting line. This is not the finish line of creating the bubble. And the other thing is, it's just a weird feeling to every day wake up and read different headlines, and sort of, I think players are feeling that too, which is why you're seeing a lot of them really kind of keep the dialogue going for these social justice causes. Breonna Taylor, what LeBron James and other folks are doing in the realm of voting rights with More Than a Vote. All these initiatives that are kind of being powered. I mean, the NBA announced yesterday they're doing community testing program in Florida and other places for communities of color that have been, disproportionately affected by coronavirus. So these things are still ongoing. And even though we're in the bubble, the outside world is on our minds, because when this is over, that's where we return, right? I mean, we all have families to go back to, friends to go back to. So, it is, it's been encouraging to see the NBA kind of build this infrastructure and think it out and execute it as well as they have so far. But, we're hoping for the same thing on the outside, myself included. I mean, that's a personal thing too, because we all want to see a safer world to come back to when this is over and a champion is crowned.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for your time, for the writers, for being here. I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like so much going on with the NBA that we could do this for, another hour without any trouble. But thank you for those of you tuned in. Appreciate you listening and especially for you subscribing and reading the work that we're doing. So to all of you, I'm going to, again, thanks and be safe out there. I'm going to throw it back to Erin and wrap it up.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom. Thank you guys all for your insight. I hope everyone enjoyed the conversation we had here today. We have recorded it and we'll be sending it out in the next few days. So don't worry about that. And then also just a quick reminder for our final episode. It is next week and it is going to be our NFL episode. So please go ahead and register for that. If you do have any other questions, you're more than welcome to email us at theevents@bayareanewsgroup.com, or for our Southern California folks at events@scng.com. So please go ahead and let us know any comments, questions you may have. And then please sign up for our next webinar. Thank you guys again. I appreciate all your time. Enjoy your Thursday afternoon and enjoy the first game of the season, I guess. So enjoy and thank you guys.